Chapter 1 The Reader of Books.
It's a funny thing about mothers and fathers. Even when their own child is the most disgusting little blister you could ever imagine, they still think that he or she is wonderful. Occasionally, one comes across parents who take the opposite line, who show no interest at all in their children. And these, of course, are far worse than the doting ones. Mr. and Miss Wormwood were two such parents. They had a son called Mikhail and a daughter called Matilda, and the parents looked upon Matilda in particular as nothing more than a scab. But Matilda, above all, she was brilliant. Her mind was so nimble, and she was so quick to learn that her ability should have been obvious even to the most half-witted of parents. The only book in the whole of this enlightened household was something called Easy Cooking belonging to her mother, and when she had read this from cover to cover and had learned all the lessons by heart, she decided she wanted something more interesting.
Daddy, do you think you could buy me a book?
A book? What do you want a flaming book for?
To read, Daddy.
What's wrong with the telly? For heaven's sake.
We've got a lonely telly with a 12-inch screen, and now you come asking for a book. You're getting spoiled, my girl.
So, Matilda went to the public library to read books. She often talked to Miss Phelps, the librarian in the library.
Where are the children's books, please?
They are over there on those lower shelves. There you like me to help?
No, thank you.
One day, Mrs. Phelps said,
Did you know that public libraries like this allow you to borrow books and take them home?
I didn't know. Could I do it?
Of course. When you have chosen the book you want, bring it to me so I can make a note of it and it's yours for 2 weeks. You can take more than one of you wish.
From then on, Matilda would visit the library only once a week in order to take out new books and return the old news. Her own small bedroom now became her reading room, and there she would sit and read most afternoons. Often with a mug of hot chocolate beside her, the books transported her into new worlds and introduced her to amazing people who lived exciting lives. She went on Olden Lady sailing ships with Joseph Conrad. She went to Africa with Ernest Hemingway and to India with Rudyard Kipling. She traveled all over the world while sitting in her little room in an English village. Chapter 2 Mr. Wormwood, the Great Car Dealer. Matilda's parents owned quite a nice house. Her father was a dealer in second-hand cars, and it seemed he did pretty well at it.
Sawdust is one of the great secrets of my success. I get it free from the sawmill.
What do you use it for? I don't see how sawdust can help you to sell second-hand cars, Daddy.
That's because you're an ignorant little twit.
His speech was never very delicate, but Matilda was used to it. Mr. Wormwood kept saying Matilda was stupid. Matilda resented being told constantly that she was ignorant and stupid when she knew she wasn't. She decided that every time her father or her mother was beastly to her, she would get her own back in some way or another. You must remember that she was still hardly 5 years old, and it is not easy for somebody as small as that to score points against an all-powerful grown-up.
Chapter 3 The Hat and the Superglue.
Just before the father left for his beastly second-hand car garage, Matilda slipped into the cloakroom and got hold of the hat he wore each day to work. Matilda, holding the hat in one hand and a thin tube of superglue in the other, proceeded to squeeze a line of glue very neatly around the inside rim of the hat. Mr. Wormwood didn't notice anything when he put the hat on. But when he arrived at the garage, he couldn't get it off. When he got home that evening, he still couldn't get the hat off.
Don't be silly, come here. I will take it off for you.
She gave the hat a sharp yank.
Oh. Don't do that. Let's go. You will take half the skin off my forehead.
It must be super glue. It couldn't be anything else. I expect you were trying to stick another feather in your head.
I haven't touched the flaming strip.
The father glared at his daughter with deep suspicion, but said nothing. Matilda, nestling in her usual chair, was watching this performance, and she said,
There's a boy down the road who got some superglue on his finger without knowing it, and then he put his finger to his nose.
What happened to him?
The finger got stuck inside his nose, and he had to go around like that for a week. He looked like an old fool. He shouldn't have put his finger up there in the first place. It's a nasty habit.
It wasn't loose by the next morning, and he wouldn't slip off. So Mrs. Wormwood took a pair of scissors and cut the thing off his head. First the top end, then the brim. He finished off with a bird white ring round his head, like some sort of a monk, and in the front, where the band had stuck directly to the bare skin, there remained a whole lot of small patches of brown leathery stuff.
You must try to get those bits off your forehead, Daddy. It looks as though you've got little brown insects crawling about all over you. People will think you've got lice.
Be quiet! Just keep your nasty mouth shut! It was surely too much to hope that it had taught the father a permanent lesson.
Chapter 4 The Ghost. After the spooky episode, Mr. Wormwood seemed to have lost his taste of boasting and bullying. Then suddenly he struck again. When Mr. Wormwood arrived home that evening, his face was very dark. Matilda happened to be curled up in an armchair in the corner, totally absorbed in the book.
Don't you ever stop reading?
Oh, hello, Daddy. Did you have a good day?
What is this trash?
He said, snatching the book from her hands.
It isn't trash, Daddy. It's lovely. It's called The Red Pony.
Filth.
No, Daddy. It's beautiful. Honestly, it is. It's about...
I don't want to know what it's about. I'm fed up with your reading. Go and find something useful to do.
And he started to rip the page out of the book.
That's a library book. It doesn't belong to me.
Then you'll have to buy another one, don't you?
And he marched out of the room. Matilda sat there very still and thoughtful. Her southern mind was already at work devising yet another suitable punishment for the poisonous parents. Fred was a friend of Matilda's, who has a talking parrot. So the following afternoon, Matilda set out to Fred's house to borrow the talking parrot. Matilda came back to her own house carrying the cage in both hands. There was a ruddy fireplace in the dining room, and she now set about reading the cage of the chimney and out of sight. That evening, while the family were having supper in the living room, a voice came across the hall.
Hello, hello, hello.
There's someone in the house. I heard a voice.
They all stopped eating and sat there very tense, listening, and all four of them crept towards the dining room and opened the door, and then there were no one there.
But there's no one here.
But I heard it. So did you.
It's a ghost. This room is haunted.
Then they all fled, slamming the door behind them. Chapter 5 Arithmetic. Mr. Wormwood saw no less than 5 cards, each on at a tidy profit. He fished out with a paper from his pocket and studied it.
Listen, boy, go and get yourself a pen and a pencil, and let's see how clever you are. Car number 1 was bought by me for £278 and sold for £1,425. Car number 2 cost me £118 and sold for £760. Car number 3 cost £111 and sold for £999.50. Car number 4 cost £86, a real whack that was, and sold for £699.50. Car number 5 cost £637 and sold for $1,649.50. You got all those figures written down, son?
Yes, Daddy, there's a lot of sums.
That you made exactly £4,303.50 altogether.
You little cheat. You looked at my bit of paper.
I'm the other side of the room. How could I possibly see it?
Of course you looked.
Chapter 6 The Platinum Blonde Man. The next morning, she got up early and went into the bathroom and locked the door. The bottle of platinum blonde hair dye extra strong was kept in the cupboard in the bathroom, and underneath the title on the label were written in words caution. This is peroxide. Keep away from children. Anyway, Mr. Wormwood kept his hair looking bright and strong, or so he thought, by rubbing into it every morning large quantities of a lotion called oil of violet hair tonic. In the early morning privacy of the bathroom, Matilda unscrewed the cap of her father's oil of violets and tipped 3/4 of the contents down the drain. Then she filled the bottle up with her mother's platinum blonde hair dye, extra strong. She carefully left enough of her father's original hair tonic in the bottle so that when she gave it a good shake, the whole thing still looked reasonably purple. The father just moving round to sit at the head of the table when the mother came sweeping out of the kitchen, carrying a huge plate piled high with eggs and sausages and bacon and tomatoes. Matilda looked up. Then she let out a scream that seemed to lift her right up into the air, and she dropped the plate with a crash and a splash onto the floor. Because Mr. Wormwood's hair was the color of sour apples, after seeing the mirror, Mr. Wormwood started yelling, putting both hands to his hair, his face turning pale green. Chapter 7, Miss Honey. Matilda entered school late at the age of 5 because of her indifferent parents. Matilda's first school was Cruncham Hall Elementary School, a solid brick building. Trunchbull, the principal of an elementary school, was the ruler of a scary school. On the other hand, Matilda's homeroom teacher was Jennifer Honey, who was gentle and calm. She always called her Miss Honey. Miss Honey told us about the principal. She insisted on strict application throughout the school. First of all, never argue with her, never talk back, always do as she says. Miss Honey emphasized. Everything she said was true. Matilda thought that to herself the Trunchbull was a fierce tyrant monster that treated the lives of both students and teachers, a huge holy terror. The first class was math. Matilda asked the children a question about math. Miss Honey asked difficult math questions out of curiosity, and Matilda was the only one who answered correctly.
What is 2 times 28?
56.
Let me ask you something more difficult. What is 14 times 19?
266.
Matilda said shortly. Then she calculated 14 times 19 with a calculator. What Matilda said was the answer. Miss Honey thought Matilda was a very smart and special child. Chapter 8, The Trunchbull. In the interval, Miss Honey left the classroom and headed straight for the headmistress' study. She knocked on the door.
Enter.
Miss Honey went in.
Yes, Miss Honey, what is it you want?
There is a little girl in my class called Matilda Wormwood. I have extraordinary things to report about this child. She is a genius.
At the mention of this word, Miss Trunchbull's face turned purple, and her whole body seemed to swell up like a bullfrog's.
A genius. So she's learned a few tables by heart, has she? That doesn't make her a genius. It makes her a ferret.
Here is my opinion. Then Matilda should be taken out of my form and placed immediately in the top form with the 11-year-olds.
So you want to get rid of her, do you? My answer is no.
Miss Honey turned and walked out of the study, feeling depressed, but by no means defeated.
I'm going to do something about this child. I don't know what it will be, but I shall find a way to help her in the end.
Chapter 9, Parents. When Miss Honey emerged from the headmistress' study, her first move was to go round to the various teachers who taught the senior class and borrow from them a number of textbooks. Then she gave it to Matilda. Miss Honey was making a decision. She was deciding that she would go herself and have a secret talk with Matilda's mothers and father. As soon as possible, having got the address from the school records, Miss Honey set out to walk from her own house to the Wormwoods' house shortly after 9. She found the house in a pleasant street where each smallest building was separated from its neighbors by a little bit of garden. She walked up the path and rang the bell. The door was opened by Mrs. Wormwood.
Yes?
I'm Matilda's teacher at school, and it is important I have a word with you.
Got into trouble already, has she?
She is in no trouble at all. Mrs. Wormwood, do you think I might come in for a few minutes and talk to you about Matilda?
Oh, very well then. Come on in and let's get it over with.
Well, all I came to tell you was that Matilda has a brilliant mind.
No way, she's not a genius, and I would have not cared even if she has a genius.
Chapter 10, Drawing the Hammer. The nice thing about Matilda was that she never shut up, so it was easy for her to make friends. Among Matilda's newfound friends was a girl called Lavender. During the third day, they were approached by a 10-year-old girl called Hortensia, and she said,
News come, I suppose. Have you met Principal yet?
We've seen her at prayers, but we haven't met her.
You've got a treat coming to you. She hates very small children. If you survive your first ill, you may just manage to live through the rest of your time here. But many don't survive.
At that point, the playground became silent.
Amanda Tripp, come here.
What's going to happen?
That idiot Amanda, she grew her hair and played it into pigtails. And Trunchbull can't stand pigtails.
Matilda and Lavender saw a girl of about 10 who had a pair of planted golden pigtails hanging over her shoulders. The girl was glued to the spot, knowing full certain that the day of judgment had come for her at last. Miss Trunchbull had now reached the victim and stood twirling over her.
I want those filthy pigtails off before you come back to school tomorrow.
And the Trunchbull grabbed hold of Amanda's pigtails and lifted the girl clear of the ground. Then she started swinging her round and round her head. Suddenly, with a mighty grunt, the Trunchbull let go of the pigtails. Amanda went sailing like a rocket right over the wild fence, and she landed on the grass and bounced 3 times and finally came to rest. Chapter 11. Rose, Globetrotter, and the Cake. At lunchtime, an announcement was made that the entire school should enter the parliamentary hall and sit down as soon as the meal is over. When all 215 boys and girls sat down, Trunchbull went to the platform.
You, come up here.
Cried Trunchbull. Suddenly he went up to the platform.
You're a thief. Yesterday morning, during recess, you stole a piece of my chocolate cake.
Cried Trunchbull. When asked to bring a cake, the cook brought a huge chocolate cake on the ceramic plate.
Put it on the table.
Said Trunchbull.
Then come on.
Very slowly the boy began to cut and eat another piece. When Bruce ate whole of the huge cake, he stopped for a few seconds and took a few deep breaths. Earlier than sensed an immense dread. When the last bite disappeared, huge cheers erupted from the audience, and the children jumped into their chairs, clapping and shouting.
Good job, Bruce!
His forehead was drizzled with sweat, but a smile of triumph appeared on his face. 12. Lavender. In the middle of the first week of Matilda's first term, Miss Honey said to the class,
I have some important news. It is the headmistress's custom to take over the class for one period each week. Ours is always 2 o'clock on Thursday afternoons, so tomorrow at 2 o'clock Miss Trunchbull will be taking over from me for one lesson. A jug of water and a glass must always be on the table here when the headmistress comes in. Now who will be responsible for seeing that?
I will.
Very well, Lavender. The jug is the kitchen.
Already Lavender's scheming mind was going over the possibilities that this water jug job had opened up for her. She longed to do something truly heroic. There was a muddy pond at the bottom of Lavender's garden, and this was the home of a colony of newts. That evening, Lavender went to the bottom of the garden determined to catch a newt. Using her school hat as a net, she swooped and caught it. The next day, she carried her secret weapon to school. Immediately after lunch, she dashed off to the kitchen and found one of the Trunchbull's famous jugs. Lavender filled it half full of water and carried it together with a glass into the class and set it on the teacher's table, and she put the newt in. There was a plop as it landed in the water.
Chapter
Chapter 13, The Weekly Test. At 2 o'clock sharp, the class assembled, including Miss Honey, who noted that the jug of water and the glass were in the proper place. Then she took up a position, standing right at back. Everyone waited. Suddenly in marched the gigantic figure of the headmistress in her belted smoke and green breeches.
Good afternoon, children.
Good afternoon, Miss Trunchbull.
The headmistress stood before the class, legs apart, hands on hips, glaring at the small boys and girls who sat nervously at their desk in front of her.
Pretty sight. What a bunch of nesting little words you are.
Everyone had the sense to stay silent. Trunchbull went on.
It makes me vomit to think that I'm going to have to put up with a load of garbage like you in my school for the next 6 years. I can see that I'm going to have to expel as many of you as possible as soon as possible to save myself from going round the bend.
She paused and snorted several times. It was a curious noise. You can hear the same sort of thing if you walk through the riding stable when the horses are being fed.
Now put your hands out in front of you, and as I walk past, I want you to turn them over so I can see if they are clean on both sides.
All went well until she came to a small boy in the second now.
What's your name?
Nigel.
Nigel what?
Nigel Hick.
That's better. Your hands are filthy, Nigel. When did you last wash them?
Well, let me think. That's rather difficult to remember exactly.
You are disgusting. You are a working factory. I don't want to see any more of you today. Go and stand in the corner on one leg with your face to the wall. Now stay where you are, boy, while I test you on your spelling to see if you've learned anything at all this past week. Now then, spell light.
I just spelled it correctly, which surprised the Trunchbull.
Miss Honey taught us how to spell a new very long word. Difficult yesterday.
I should be fascinated.
Here it is. Mrs. D, Mrs. I, Mrs. FFI, Mrs. C, Mrs. U, Mrs. LTY.
How perfectly ridiculous. Why are all those women married?
Trunchbull had returned to her place in front of the class and sensed what the child was thinking, and she didn't like it.
Stand up when you speak to me. What is your name?
My name is Matilda Wormwood, Miss Trunchbull.
Wormwood, is it? In that case, you must be the daughter of that man who owns Wormwood Motors. He is a crook.
He is clever at his business.
I don't like clever people. They are all crooks. You are most certainly crooked. I shall be keeping a very careful eye on you from now on.
Chapter 14, The First Miracle. Matilda sat down again at her desk. The Trunchbull seated herself behind the teacher's table. It was the first time she had sat down during the lesson. Then she reached out a hand and took hold of the water jug. Still holding the jug by the handle, but not lifting it yet, she said,
How splendid it would be to walk into this classroom with a gigantic spray gun in my hands and start pumping it, or better still, some huge strips of sticky paper. I would hang them all around the school and you'd all get stuck to them, and that would be the end of it. Wouldn't that be a good idea, Miss Honey?
If it's meant to be a joke, headmistress, I don't think it's a very funny one.
You wouldn't, would you, Miss Honey? And it's not meant to be a joke. My idea of a perfect school, Miss Honey, is one that has no children in it at all. One of those days I shall start up a school like that. I think it will be very successful.
The Trunchbull now lifted the large blue water jug and poured some water into her glass. And suddenly, with the water, out came the long, slimy newt straight into the glass. The Trunchbull let out a yell and leaped off her chair as though a firecracker has gone off underneath her. And now the children also saw the long, thin, slimy, yellow-bellied, lizard-like creature twisting and twirling in the glass. And they squirmed and jumped about as all, shouting,
What is it? Oh, it's disgusting. It's a snake. It's a baby crocodile.
She started at the creature, twisting and wiggling in the glass. Curiously enough, she had never seen a newt before. Natural history was not her strong point. She hadn't the faintest idea what this thing was.
Matilda, stand up.
Who, me? What have I done?
Stand up at once, you filthy little maggot. You are not fit to be in this school. You ought to be behind bars. That's where you ought to be. I shall have you thrown out of this establishment in utter grace.
The Trunchbull was in such a rage that her face had taken on a boiled color, and little flakes of frost were gathering in the corner of her mouth. But she was not the only one who was losing her cool. Matilda was also beginning to see red.
I did not do it.
Oh, yes, you did. Nobody else could have thought of a trick like that. Your father was right to warn me about you. You're finished in this school, young lady. You're finished everywhere.
I'm telling you, I did not do it. I've never even seen a creature like that in my life.
I'm telling you to shut up. If you don't shut up at once and sit down, I shall remove my belt and let you have it with the end that has the.
She longed to march up and grab the glass and tip the contents, nude all over. Over the Trunchbull's head, she trembled to think what the Trunchbull would do to her if she didn't that. And now, quite slowly, there began to creep over Matilda a most extraordinary and peculiar feeling. A sense of power brewing in those eyes of hers, a feeling of great strength and settings in self deep inside her eyes.
Tip it over.
And there it tittered for a few seconds before finally toppling over and falling with a sharp twinkle onto the desktop. The water in it and the squirming newt splashed out of all over Miss Trunchbull's enormous bosom. And the Trunchbull, her face more like a boiled ham than ever, was standing before the class quivering with fury.
Who did it? Come on, one up. Step forward. You won't escape this time. Who is responsible for this dirty job? Who pushed this over this class? Matilda, it was you. I know it was you. Admit that you did it.
I have not moved away from my desk, Miss Trunchbull. Since the lesson began, I can say no more.
Matilda didn't move. Nobody moved. You must have knocked it over yourself. None of the children did, Miss Trunchbull. I am telling you the truth, headmistress.
I'm fed up with you on else bunch of widgets.
I think we've had enough school for one day, don't you? The class is dismissed. You may all go out into the playground and wait for your parents to come and take you home.
Chapter 15 The Second Miracle. After the other children had all disappeared, she remained at her desk, quiet and thoughtful. She knew she had to tell somebody about what has happened with the glass. She couldn't possibly keep a gigantic secret like that bottled up inside her. What she needed was just one person, one wise and sympathetic grown-up who could help her to understand the meaning of those extraordinary happenings. On the spur of the moment, Matilda decided that the one person she would like to confide in was Miss Honey.
Please, may I talk to you for a moment?
Of course you may. What's troubling you?
Something very peculiar has happened to me, Miss Honey.
Yes, Matilda. Tell me what was happened to you that is so peculiar.
Miss Trunchbull isn't going to expel me, is she? Because it wasn't me who put that creature in a jug of water. I promise you it wasn't.
I know it wasn't.
Am I going to be expelled?
I think not. The headmistress simply got a little overexcited, that's all.
Good, but that isn't what I want to talk to you about.
What do you want to talk to me about, Matilda?
I want to talk to you about the glass of water with the creature in it. You saw it spilling all over Miss Trunchbull, didn't you?
I did indeed.
I got so angry at being accused of something I hadn't done that I made it happen.
You made what happen, Matilda?
I made the glass tip over.
I still don't quite understand what you mean.
I did it with my eyes. I was staring at it and wishing it to tip, and then my eyes went all hot and funny and some sort of power came out of them and the glass just toppled over.
I'm still not following you. Do you mean you actually willed the glass to tip over?
Yes, with my eyes.
If you did that, then it is just about the greatest miracle a person has ever performed since the time of Jesus.
I did it, Miss Honey.
Could you do it again?
I don't know, but I think I might be able to.
Should I put water in it?
I don't think it matters.
Very well, then. Go ahead and tip it over.
It may take some time.
Take all the time you want. I'm in no hurry.
Tip glass tip.
But her lips didn't move and she made no sound. She simply shouted the words inside her head. And now she concerted the whole of her mind and her brain and her will up into her eyes. And once again, but much more quicker than before, she felt the electricity gathering, and the power was beginning to surge, and the hotness was coming into the eyeballs. She saw it wobble, then it tilted, then it toppled right over and fell into the tinkle onto the tabletop, not 12 inches from Miss Honey's folded arms. Miss Honey's mouth dropped open and her eyes stretched so wide you would see the white all around. She didn't say a word. She couldn't.
I'm all right. I'm quite all right, Miss Honey, so don't be alarmed.
You seem so far away.
Oh, I was. I was flying past the stars on silver wings. It was wonderful. It went much quicker this time.
It's not possible. I don't believe it. I simply don't believe it. Would you like to come back and have tea at my cottage?
Oh, I'd love to.
Good. Get all of your things and I'll meet you outside in a couple of minutes.
You won't tell anyone about this thing that I did, will you, Miss Honey?
I wouldn't dream of it.
Chapter 16. Miss Sunny's College. Miss Sunny and Matilda rode together to Miss Sunny's college, and now that they were alone together, Matilda got wildly excited.
Miss Honey, I feel like I could move everything.
Calm yourself down, child. Let's not get too worked up. And we must tread very carefully from now on.
Why must we tread carefully, Miss Honey?
Because we are playing with mysterious words that we know nothing about.
They arrived at Miss Sunny's college. The college was made with red blocks, and it was so small that it looked more like a doll's house than a human dwelling. At the kitchen, Matilda helped Miss Sonny make tea, and after a conversation while making tea, Matilda found out that Miss Sonny was very poor.
Sit down, Matilda said. We'll have a nice cup of tea.
And they started their conversation.
I've been thinking about what you did with that glass. It is a great power you have been given. So far as I know, nobody else in the history has been able to make objects move without using any outside help at all. The fascinating thing would be to find out the real limit of your power. Do you have any idea of your power's limit?
I simply don't know, but it would be fun to find out.
Chapter 17 Miss Sonny's Story.
Miss Honey, do they pay you badly at our school?
Not too badly. I get about the same as the others.
But it must still be very little if you are so dreadfully poor. Do all the teachers live like this, with no furniture and no kitchen stove and no bathroom?
No, they don't. I just happen to be the exception.
I expect you just happen to like living in a very simple way. It must make house cleaning an awful lot easier, and you don't have furniture to polish or any of those silly little ornaments lying around that have to be dusted every day. And I suppose if you don't have a fridge, you don't have to go out and buy all sorts of junky things like eggs and mayonnaise and ice cream to fill it up with. It must save a terrific lot of shopping.
At this point, Matilda noticed that Miss Sonny's face had gone all tight and peculiar looking. Her whole body had become rigid. In the space of 30 seconds, the atmosphere in the tiny room had changed completely, and now it was vibrating with awkwardness and secrets.
I am very sorry I asked you those questions.
Why shouldn't you ask? Perhaps I even wanted you to ask. Maybe that is why I invited you here after all. You are so wiser than your years, my dear. I suppose we might call you a grown-up child, if you see what I mean.
Matilda didn't say anything.
Up to now, I have found it impossible to talk to anyone about my problems. I couldn't face the embarrassment, and anyway, I lacked the courage. Any courage I had was knocked out of me when I was young. But now, all of a sudden, I have a sort of desperate wish to tell everything to somebody. I know you are only a tiny little girl, but there is some kind of magic in you somewhere. I've seen it with my own eyes. May I tell you a story?
Of course.
I'm 23 years old. When I was born, my father was a doctor in this village, and my mother died when I was 2. My father, a beach doctor, had to beg someone to run the house and to look after me. So he invited my mother's unmarried sister, my aunt, to come and live with us. She agreed and she came, but I hated her right from the start, because the aunt was not a kind person. I can't think why I am telling you all this.
Go on, please.
Well, when I was 5, my father died very suddenly, and so I was left to live alone with my aunt. She became my legal guardian. She had all the powers of a parent over me, and in some way or another, she became the actual owner of the house.
How did your father die?
I myself was much too young to question it at the time, but I found out later that there was a good deal of mystery surrounding his death.
Didn't you know how he died?
Well, not actually. You see, no one could believe that he would ever have done it. He was such a very sane and sensible man.
Done what?
Killed himself.
Did he? I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that the ant killed him and made it look as though he'd done it himself.
I'm not thinking anything. One must never think things like that without proof.
Anyway, what happened when you were left all alone with the ant? Wasn't she nice to you?
Nice? She was a demon. As soon as my father was out of the way, she became a holy terror. But you must remember that this aunt of mine is a much respected figure in the community. She has a lot of influence.
Who is she?
Miss Trunchbull.
Chapter 18. The Names.
Miss Trunchbull, you mean she is your aunt? No wonder you were terrified.
After my father died when I was 5.5, she used to make me bath myself all alone. And if she came up and thought I hadn't worshipped properly, she would push my head under the water and hold it there. But don't get up started on what she used to do. That won't help us, Ed.
No, it won't. I want to go home now and think about all the things I've heard this afternoon.
Of course, I kept you here far too long. Your mother will be starting to worry.
She never does that, but I would like to go home now, please, if you don't mind.
Come along then.
The two of them walked all the way to Matilda's house in complete silence.
You had better forget everything I told you this afternoon.
I won't promise to do that, but I will promise not to talk about it to anyone anymore. I've been thinking about it all the way back from your cottage, and I believe I've got just a tiny little bit of an idea.
You mustn't please forget it.
I would like to ask you 3 last things before I stop talking about it. Please will you answer them, Miss Honey?
Miss Sunny Smart, she told herself, how this little snippet of a girl seemed suddenly to be taking charge of her problems, and with such authority too.
Well, that depends on what the questions are.
The first thing is this. What did Miss Trunchbull call your father when they were around the house at home?
I'm sure she called me Magnus. That was his first name.
And what did your father call Miss Trunchbull?
Her name is Agatha. That's what he would have called her.
And lastly, what did your father and Miss Trunchbull call you around the house?
They called me Jenny.
Matilda pondered these answers very carefully.
Thank you, and now I won't mention the subject anymore. Goodbye, Miss Honey.
Chapter 19. The Practice. Matilda found the house empty as usual. She went straight into the living room and opened the drawer of the sideboard where she knew her father kept a box of cigars. She took one out and carried it up to her bedroom and shut herself in. Now for the practice, she told herself.
It's going to be tough, but I'm determined to do it.
Her plan for helping Miss Honey was beginning to form beautifully in her mind. She had it now in almost every detail, but in the end it all depended upon her being able to do one very special thing with her eye power. There was a small dressing table in Matilda's bedroom with her hairbrush and comb on it and 2 library books. She cleared these things to one side and laid the cigar down in the middle of the dressing table. Then she walked away and sat on the end of her bed.
Move,
she whispered, and to her intense surprise, almost at once, the cigar rolled away across the top of the dressing table and fell onto the carpet. Matilda had enjoyed that. It was lovely doing it. She crossed the bedroom and picked up the cigar and put it back on the table. Now for the difficult one, she thought.
But if I have the power to push, then surely I also have the power to lift.
She sat on the end of the bed and started again. It was easy now to summon up the power behind her eyes. It was like pushing a trigger in the brain.
Lift,
she whispered.
lift, lift.
At first, the cigar started to roll away, but then, with Matilda concentrating fiercely, one end of it slowly lifted up about an inch off the tabletop. With a colossal effort, she managed to hold it there for about 10 seconds. Then, it fell back again.
I'm getting it. I'm starting to do it.
For the next hour, Matilda kept practicing, and in the end, she had managed, by the sheer power of her eyes, to lift the whole cigar clear off the table about 6 inches into the air and hold it there for about a minute. From then on, every single day after school, Matilda shut herself in her room and practiced with the cigar. 6 days later, by the following Wednesday evening, she was able not only to lift up the cigar up into the air, but also to move it around exactly as she wished. It was beautiful.
I can do it. I can really do it. I can pick the sugar up just with my eye power and push it and pull it in the air any way I want.
All she had to do now was to put her great plan into action.
Chapter 20. The Third Miracle. The next day was Thursday, and that, as the whole of Miss Honey's class knew, was the day on which the headmistress would take charge of the first lesson after lunch. In the morning, Miss Honey said to them,
One or two of you did not particularly enjoy the last occasion when the headmistress took the class, so today.
After lunch, the class reassembled. Miss Honey stood at one side of the room. They all sat silent, apprehensive, waiting. And then, like some giant of doom, the enormous Trunchbull strode into the room in her green breeches and cotton smoke. She went straight to her jug of water and lifted up by the handle and peered inside.
Let me see how well you know your 3 times table, or to put it another way, let us see how badly Miss Honey has taught you the 3 times table, you.
The Trunchbull shouted, pointing a finger the size of a rolling pin at the boy called Wilfred.
Recite the 3 times table backwards.
I haven't run it backwards.
She's taught you nothing, Miss Honey. Why have you taught them absolutely nothing at all in the last week?
That is not true. They have all learned their 3 times table, but I see no point in teaching it to them backwards.
Don't you get impertinent with me, Miss Honey?
The Trunchbull turned back to the unfortunate Wilfred.
Very well, boy. Answer me this. I have 7 apples, 7 oranges, and 7 bananas. How many pieces of fruit do I have altogether? Hurry up, get on with it. Give me the answer.
That's setting up! That isn't the 3 times table.
You blithering idiot. That is the 3 times table. You have 3 separate loads of fruit, and each load has 7 pieces. Their sevens are 21. Can you see that? You stagnant cesspool. I'll give you one more chance. I have 8 countess, 8 monkey nuts, and 8 nutty little idiots like you. How many dots do I have altogether? Answer me quickly.
Please wait. I've got to add up 8 coconuts and 8 monkey nuts.
You boasting blister, this is not adding up. This is multiplication. The answer is 3 eggs. Or is it egg 3? What is the difference between their eggs and egg 3s? Tell me that, you mangled little Virgil, and look sharp about it.
By now, Wilfred was far too frightened and bewildered even to speak.
Egg 3s.
The Trunchbull shouted, swinging Wilfred from side to side by his ankle.
Egg 3s is the same as 3 eggs or 24. Leave at that.
At exactly that moment, Nigel, at the other end of the room, jumped to his feet and started pointing excitedly at the blackboard and screaming.
The chalk, look at the chalk. It's moving all on its own. It's writing something.
What of lages is this? Who's doing this? Who's lighting it? No, I can be. It can be Magnus.
Miss Honey, at the side of the room, glanced swiftly at Matilda. The child was sitting very straight at her desk, head held high, the mouth compressed, and the eyes glittering like 2 stars. For some reason, everyone now looked at the Trunchbull. The woman's face had turned white as snow, and her mouth was opening and shutting like a halebut out of the water and giving out a series of strangled gasps. The chalk stopped writing. It hovered for a few moments, then suddenly it dropped to the floor with a tinkle and broke in two.
Trunchbull has fallen down. Miss Trunchbull is on the floor.
This was the most sensational bit of news of all, and the entire class jumped up out of their seats to have a really good look. Chapter 21. A New Home. Later that day, the news began to spread that the headmistress had recovered from her faint fit and had then marched out of the school building tight-lipped and white in the face. The next morning, she did not turn up at school. When school was over, Mr. Tripoli decided to investigate further, so he walked to the house where Miss Trunchbull lived on the edge of the village, the lonely small red brick Georgian building known as the Red House, tucked away in the woods behind the hills. He rang the bell. No answer. He knocked loudly. No answer. He tried the door and to his surprise found it unlocked. He went in. The house was silent and there was no one in it. And there was no clothes or underclothes or shoes anywhere. They had all gone. On the second morning, Miss Honey received by registered post a letter from a firm of local solicitors informing her that the last will and testament of her late father, Dr. Honey, had suddenly mysteriously turned up. This document relieved that ever since her father's death, Miss Honey had in fact been the rightful owner of a property on the edge of the village known as the Red House, which until recently has been occupied by Miss Agatha Trunchbull. One evening, a few weeks later, Matilda was having tea with Miss Honey in the kitchen of the Red House after school, as they always did, when Matilda said suddenly,
"Something strange has happened to me, Miss Honey."
Tell me about it.
This morning, just for fun, I tried to push something over with my eyes and I couldn't do it. Nothing moved. I didn't even feel the hotness building up behind my eyeballs. The power had gone.
The two of them stayed sitting and talking in the kitchen for an hour or so longer. And then, at about 6 o'clock, Matilda said good night and set out to walk home to her parents' house, which was about an 8-minute journey away. When she arrived at her own gate, she saw a large black Mercedes motor car parked outside. Her mother and father were both in the hall, frantically stuffing clothing and various objects into suitcases.
What on earth's going on?
We're off. We're leaving for the airport in half an hour, so get ready to go. Get a move on, girl.
Off? Where to?
Spain.
I don't want to go to Spain. I love it here and I love my school.
Just do as you're told and stop arguing. I've got enough troubles without messing about with you. We're leaving in 30 minutes. I'm not missing that plane.
But how long for, Daddy? When are we coming back?
We aren't. Now beat it. I'm busy.
Matilda turned away from him and walked through the open front door. As soon as she was on the road, she began to run. She headed straight back towards Miss Honey's house and reached it in less than 4 minutes.
What in the world is the matter?
They're leaving. They've all gone mad and they're filling their suitcase and they're leaving for Spain in about 30 minutes.
Who is?
Mommy and Daddy and my brother Mike, and they say I've got to go with them.
You mean for holiday?
Forever. Daddy said we were never coming back. I don't want to go with them. I want to go with them.
I'm afraid I can't.
I want to live here with you. Please let me live here with you.
I only wish you could, but I'm afraid it's not possible. You cannot leave your parents just because you want to. They have a right to take you with them.
But what if they agreed? What if they said, yes, I can stay with you? Would you let me stay with you then?
Yes, that would be heaven.
Well, I think they might. I honestly think they might. They don't actually care tuppence about me.
Matilda started to run.
Not so fast.
We've got to be fast. They're leaving any moment. Come on, please come with me and ask them. But we'll have to hurry. We'll have to run.
The next moment, the two of them were running down the drive together.
Daddy and Mommy, I don't want to go with you. I want to stay here and live with Miss Honey, and she says that I can, but only if you give me permission. Please say yes. Go on, Daddy. Say yes. Say yes, Mommy.
You're that teacher woman who once came here to see me, aren't you?
This one have to go on the back seat. There's no more room in the boot.
I would love to have Matilda. I will look after her with loving care, Mr. Wormwood, and I would pay for everything.
Come on, Harry, why don't you let her go? If that's what she wants. It'll be one less to look after.
I'm in a hurry. I've got a plane to catch. If she wants to stay, let her stay. It's fine with me.
Matilda leaped into Miss Honey's arms and hugged her, and Miss Honey hugged her back. And then the mother and father and brother were inside the car, and the car was pulled away with the tires screaming. The brother gave a wave through the rear window, but the other two didn't even look back. Miss Honey was still hugging the tiny girl in her arms, and neither of them said a word as they stood there watching the big black car tearing out of the corner at the end of the road and disappearing forever into the distance.